This is the Post Shift Podcast, a raw look at the hospitality industry. Hey there, Post Shifters, and welcome to another episode of the Post Shift Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Shawn Soole. This week is a little bit different. I actually got interviewed. I sat down with the Dork Uncorked team at CFAX a couple of weeks ago and enjoyed a good long chat about Great Northern Cocktails, my cocktail book. It's very rare that I get interviewed these days, so it was like, okay, well, this is something different, so I thought I'd put it up on the podcast, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks all for the support. We've passed the 100th episode now, so I'm really happy to be in Season 2, episode whatever this one will be. But I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Thank you very much for the support in 2019. Go out and buy a copy of Great Northern Cocktails. If you ever pass me in anywhere and you've got the book on you, I will be happy to sign it. But I hope you enjoy this episode, guys. Have a good week, and bye.
Now, Dork Uncorked with Rod Phillips and Ryan Price on CFAX 1070.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Rod.
And Rod, we are going to do a cocktail episode today.
Yeah, you know, we don't very often do it.
No.
We don't do it very often, and we probably should. I know we talk about wine a lot, and I'm sure everybody out there who's listening is going, oh, thank God they're not talking about wine again this week. But we also happen to have a guest in studio.
Yeah, we've got a special guest to talk cocktails with us. He's an author. He is a hospitality consultant in Victoria and beyond.
He is a master of Amaro.
Ah. I like that.
He's the victor of vermouth.
Oh, that's even better.
Yeah.
I like that one. Who do we got here, Rod?
I don't know. No, I'm happy that Shawn Soole, who is the hospitality consultant, such a vanilla title.
That's why, Victor of Vermouth. I think that's something that you could work onto a business card.
That's right.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's been so long. It's what we were talking just off the air about 2015 since the last time and I think your titles and what all you've done since then has probably well expanded beyond what we can do to introduce you. What's your parents' name? Maybe we'll just start with your parents.
Go back to our origin story.
That's right, exactly.
So I was born and raised in Australia. Well, born and raised in Australia. Came to Canada in 2006. I took over Clive's in 2009.
And that's how a lot of people may recognize you or recognize your impact.
I think that's where my name sort of started.
Right.
It was definitely 2009. I was fortunate enough that Clive's did very well, and we garnered a lot of awards, which I've been on CFAX a number of times talking about. And then I went on to do a multitude of different projects. Little Jumbo. I did Olo when they did the rebrand. I went over and did Cafe Mexico and did the redesign, construction, and relaunch for Cafe Mexico. FTW. Oh, God. There's a few others in there. Sizzling Tandoor, The Guild. There's a long list. I think last year when I opened up those venues in Singapore, which I know we're going to talk about, I think they were my 10th and 11th venue in 6 years. 10th and 11th venue in 6 years. So Pagliacci's.
Right, and you've also done a little bit of writing. Like you're the Margaret Atwood of...
Jeez, that's a huge call.
Margaret Atwood of cocktails.
That's
also
right.
something that fits in a business card. Way better than hospitality consultant.
The Booker Prize winning. No, I just...
I was lucky enough that in 2013, I released my first cocktail book, which was called Cocktail Culture. And that was based around bartenders and cocktails of Victorian bartenders. I think we had about 40 bartenders from around Victoria.
As in the 1800s? Victorian bartenders?
Yes. Victorian bartenders.
Yeah.
And so, and then late in 2018, I reached out to a publisher friend of mine in the UK and said, hey, I've got an idea for this book. I want to go Canada-wide this time and create the same sort of concept as Cocktail Culture, but with all of Canada.
Right.
And so that's sort of how Great Northern Cocktails came about. So we've got about 150 bartenders from across the country, which if anybody's ever worked with bartenders is like rounding up cats. Pretty much.
There's a lot of that goes on in our industry, isn't it?
Exactly.
It's like, what happened?
And for some reason, I keep doubling down on it. And I'm just like, I hated this process, but I love the result. And then I do it again. I'm like, oh, man, I completely forget about hating this process.
So what's the secret? How do you actually – because obviously you've written the book. It's been published. It is available. What was your secret in getting all those cats herded?
Tons of messages.
Right, just spam them just over.
It was literally, it would be an email, an Instagram message, a Facebook message, any way I could possibly get a hold of them. If I had their cell number, it would be like texting it. And I was in Singapore at the time when I was like editing, so they were getting text messages with the time change.
Yeah, nice.
So I was like, dude, you need to get this to me. I learned a ton. I'm already sort of roughly working on the second edition. Just as I'm traveling around, I'm writing down bartenders I've met. I've got like 3 notebooks, and I write down a bartender I met, which city he or she is in. And then the next time around, I'm going to do a few things a little bit differently. But I have a fantastic understanding publisher in the UK, Mixellany, and they've published a whole bunch of way more auspicious bartenders and industry people than me. So I'm absolutely completely blessed that they took a random Australian dude who lives in Victoria, Canada, to write a book, because they publish like Gary Reagan's books and Salvatore Calabrese books and Dale DeGroff books, and like, so I was very, very lucky, and Anastasia has been immensely understanding. We released it in October last year, and it's been really, really good.
Well, so tell us about it. Like you've given us the inside cover there, but give us some more details.
So for me, for Great Northern Cocktails, as well as cocktail culture, I wanted to get behind the stories of the bartenders, where they came from, how they got into bartending. I think cocktail books, to a degree, just sort of blurt out and blep recipes all the time, and prep recipes in the back and stuff. So I wanted to sort of put a face and name to these cocktail recipes, and how these people sort of evolved to create these drinks. And we have everything from super simple at-home bartender recipes that can be replicated really easily to like hardcore molecular mixology stuff. So it's all like graded.
Molecular mixology?
Well, molecular mixology includes like caviars, flavored caviar pearls.
Oh, I was
foams.
picturing test tubes. And
But it is very much similar to that.
Yeah.
Like, the molecular mixology is sort of gray area now. It used to be very Wizard of Oz, like behind the curtain sort of stuff back in the day. Now it's sort of in the mainstream bartender scene, with a couple of books like Liquid Intelligence that sort of demystified it all and pulled the curtain back and just realized it's an old dude on a bunch of strings.
right.
So molecules like foams and pearls and all these sort of different things. So a lot of people went really hardcore and that sort of stuff. So we got like Fruit Loop infused bourbons and like crazy stuff. But it's a signature cocktail from that bartender in that city with that story.
It's Great Northern Cocktails. You're not just featuring the bartenders of Canada. I'm assuming some of the cocktails themselves are uniquely Canadian as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I didn't want to focus on like trying to pitch a certain spirit or craft spirits or something like that. I really wanted it to be based around the bartenders. And we have a section in the book called Off the Beaten Path, which is bartenders like off, like literally away from the big cities. So we've got bartenders from Red Deer in here. We've got a bartender from Duncan. We've got Jeff Downey from the old Firehouse and Duncan in here. We've got Tofino bartenders in here. Halifax, like everybody from Halifax to Victoria have been represented. But I've missed a whole bunch of areas. Like there's really good cocktail bars in the Yukon, which I'm going to have to go visit. Salmon Arm.
Second book.
Yeah. I didn't even have anything from Ottawa because I didn't get a huge response from the bartenders in Ottawa. So there's a whole myriad, like we 150. I'm going to put money down that the second edition will be close to 250. So it'll really amp up, which means there's another 100 bartenders I got to herd to get recipes.
Get the kibble out.
I'd love to hear an example of is there a cocktail that you cover in the book that's a story and a recipe that you'd like to share as a taste?
You know what? I've actually just pulled out a really great one. The photo is fantastic. This one's from Grant Seeney at The Botanist in Vancouver. Another Australian bartender. So this was random. I just picked up the book and flicked it. Wasn't I didn't have a dog eat or anything. But The Botanist is in Vancouver at the Pacific Rim Hotel, and their real mandate is, as if the name, they go out and they go out into the forest and work with foragers and do really crazy stuff. And so his cocktail is called Candy Cap Magic, and it is a 3-star cocktail, which means it's a lot of work to get done. And I'll show you the photo as why it's a lot of work. But it's candy cap mushroom infused rye, sweet vermouth, house-made root beer syrup, and then dashes of bittered sling Kensington bitters. But the big thing is here's the serving option. Serve inside a terrarium on a bed of dry ice and moss. Lace dry ice with essentials oils of Puritsure and Rain Essence. add warm water to create steam, close terrarium to create fog above moss, then serve.
Oh,
and
wow.
So there is a picture in this.
So it's not just the recipe, it's also the recipe for how to create the atmosphere that this needs to be served in.
And,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so Botanist is Botanist is definitely one of those sort of super elevated cocktail bars.
Is there a lot of space at the all I'm picturing is where do you stack all your terrariums?
Well, they've actually set themselves up really well. They actually have at the end of the bar where most bars would have like a little kitchenette or something. It is a kitchenette, but it's a cocktail lab. Mm-hmm. And so they have it set up so if you get a drink ordered like this, the bartender one of the bartenders will split off and go down to that lab and build it all out in this separate like lab area. So they've got like logs that they've collected, driftwood, and then they've had a glass blower blow some glass, and as it's hot, push it down onto the log so it actually molds to the driftwood log, and that's one of their cocktails. So that's one of their most extreme ones. But then a lot of other bartenders are like, you know what? Like, I just love a Boulevardier variation or a Negroni variation, and that's what I'm going to put in. I'm like, cool. Like, someone's put their perfect dirty martini. And I'm like, I messaged him back, and I was like, is this what you want to go with? She's like, yeah, I just love it. I think it's dialed in. I think it's one of my favorite cocktails. I'm like, that's what I want. I'm like, cool. That's great. It's your signature cocktail. Who am I to judge?
Wow. So I'm going to be in Vancouver in a little bit for the wine festival. There, I talked about wine again.
Maybe we had to have at least one mention of wine in the show.
Maybe I'll stay at the Pacific Rim and have a terrarium.
Have a candy cat magic. But those like the team at Botanist won like bar team of the year at bowls around the world in Holland recently, and most of their bartenders have won or at least placed in worldwide cocktail competitions. So the team there is super talented. They're very lucky that they all sort of feed off each other and work off each other, which they've got their own little mini culture inside the big cocktail culture of Vancouver. Same thing in Victoria.
Would they shoot me if I went in and said, can I get a Rye Coke?
No, not at all. At the end of the day, I think there is a certain level of that sort of being broken down these days in cocktail culture. It's always the nature of the beast when cocktail culture sort of starts. Everybody's working really hard to sort of push a certain agenda. But eventually the culture matures and you have enough clientele still coming in for those cocktails. But you're always going to have that like small piece of market that goes to your bar who doesn't know anything about your bar and just wants what they usually have.
Right. So now, what it makes Canadian cocktails or cocktail culture or bartenders Canadian? How are the recipes and the stories that you have in the book, are they that much different than what you would find in New York, L.A., Singapore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Is there something really truly Canadian about it?
I don't think so, like when you really get down to the nuts and bolts side of things of it. But I think there's always there's a lot of people who say their inspiration came from growing up in Halifax, like Shane Behan. In Halifax, he was born and bred in Halifax. He's never worked anywhere else either. I love him because he's always stayed the true course. Like I have here in Victoria, I didn't move to Vancouver or somewhere a bigger city. Like he's always stayed the course in his city, and so his love is really like he has a huge amount of knowledge about the maritime rum culture from like the 1800s and the early 1900s. Right. So like that's influenced the way his cocktails are, and he is an amazing hospitality person. I think the big difference is that the common thread through every bartender is that everybody wants to give Canadian style hospitality. Right. You know, like even the Australian bartenders and me included, like Canadian hospitality is a very special thing, I think. It's a very special style.
And I guess, too, you know, the first thing you think, the cliches when you think of Canadian cocktails, you're probably thinking maple syrup and that kind of stuff, which I'm sure shows up.
Bacon, bison.
But I also think it's interesting you mentioned, you know, out in the Maritimes, they have a whole history to draw from of the rum running and that culture. I was flipping through the book just a second ago. I see one of the Victoria entries involves a cup of tea. And how much more Victoria can you get than tea culture, right? Like that's reflected there. And it's not the stereotypical, we're all hockey playing maple syrup guzzling Canadians. There's
drinking
other
Caesars.
Yeah, exactly. There's other aspects to our culture to draw from, and these bartenders are doing that in a very regional way, and that's kind of cool, and it's a neat thing to explore through the book Great Northern Cocktails.
Is there any Caesar recipes in there? No. Okay. Just
and don't get me wrong, I love the Caesar, and I think I was talking to I'm coming up close to my 100th podcast episode.
Tell us about your podcast. By the way,
we'll get there in a second.
Okay.
And I was talking to a friend, and he was like, "Oh, is there any Caesar books up here?" And Mott's puts out a Caesar cocktail book, and I think the Caesar culture in Canada is always it's a thing. I don't really quite get it, which is sacrilegious, I know, but I also don't get maple syrup. It's just not what I grew up on. Just like me giving Vegemite to Canadians, they're not going to understand it.
No, don't throw it back at you.
All you need to understand is you could order a salad.
Yeah.
With alcohol in it.
Yes.
That's it.
And a chicken wing and some bacon and some shrimps.
Just give me an appetizer and drink combined. It's efficient.
And I enjoy like a good solid Caesar, but I like them shaken, served up, which is very weird. Red snapper style. And it has its time and place. But I think we're getting outside that realm of what people look in and see like, oh, classic cocktails from Canada only include the Caesar.
Right.
And so we have a whole schwackload of really good classic cocktails in Canada that are now starting to get some good notoriety.
We're talking to Shawn Soole. He's the author of Great Northern Cocktails, which is available. Where can you find the book?
Right now, we're going to be getting the chapters Indigo very shortly, but I would support local and go down to Munro's.
Gotcha.
There's a whole schwackload of signed ones down there.
He is the author of Great Northern Cocktails, but he's so much more. He's a guy who also goes around the world, apparently, helping to set up restaurants. Not just the bars, not just the cocktail menu, but the whole restaurants, which is just a fascinating thing to do. Welcome again. Hello to Shawn.
Thank you for having me.
This is interesting. Like, what a cool job being this like hired gun who goes around the world. I got an idea for a restaurant, but I need somebody to make it a reality. You're the guy.
The mixology mercenary.
That's pretty much. Actually, that's one of my trademarks. But yes, bar mercenary. I was lucky in 2019. Well, it was good. It was an amazing experience. I
gotta like, because this is just, so I'm picturing you behind the bar at Clive's.
Yep.
You've got the black armbands on. You got the suspenders.
Was it back when I had the faux hawk and everything?
Oh yeah,
too?
Yeah. And I'm thinking, okay, look at that guy. Look at the personality behind the bar. That's how did you go from behind the bar to doing these projects for entire restaurants? Like,
I think that's just a progression. Like I talk about success and mistakes a lot. And I think with every success and mistake, I learn a ton, and I'm always thirsty for knowledge. I think I've always done a lot of design work, and like all of Cafe Mexico was completely designed. I reopened that. I helped design the Pagliacci's bar. So I self-taught myself design, like hand-drawn designs. When I designed Little Jumbo back in the day. And that sort of just kept going. So I've helped design like the new Merrydale distillery that's going in at Dockside. I did all the bar design and back of house design for that. So I self-taught myself all hand-drawn drafting with Little Jumbo, a whole schwackload of operations manuals and everything like you would do when you're setting up your own business. And then that sort of just led into redoing Olo with Brad and Sahara and doing the bar program there for a year. And then Cafe Mexico, Pagliacci's. But then on the side, I do like the Japanese Village. I didn't touch their program whatsoever. I literally just redesigned their lounge, put their lounge in. So I'm always thirsty for being better than I was yesterday, I think is the big thing. It's like every morning I wake up, I'm like, well, I was okay yesterday. Let's make it better today. And so in 2018, I went back to school to start my associate diploma in advanced hospitality and tourism management. And so I did a big HR segment as you're supposed to, which then led to a lot of the HR work that I did in Singapore and Montreal. Singapore.
So Australian kid comes to Canada, writes a couple books about Canadian cocktail culture, and then immediately bolts to Singapore.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough that I speak at a lot of shows and do a lot of networking. I had an old friend who was one of my longest friends here in Canada. He moved to Singapore a couple of years ago, and he opened up – he's not in the hospitality industry, but he opened up a little American-style grill. And so they were expanding, and so he was like, hey, do you want to come and do this? And so it went from like 0 to 60 really quickly. So I remember I was on vacation in the Bahamas with the family at the start of May, and the week I had off between that trip and my trip to Portugal for the Lisbon Bar Show, we sort of started chatting via text and WhatsApp, and then we had a video chat. While I was in Lisbon, I wrote the contract for the project. I got back from Lisbon. I had a week in Victoria, and then I flew to Singapore. So in the space of like 3 weeks, I went from not knowing about the project, literally having just a 14-page like brand identity sort of like renderings and plan, to being in the country. And it was my first visit there. It was a huge steep learning curve, just with everything. It is a wonderful utopia, but huge learning curve, and they wanted to be opened in 4 to 5 weeks. And if you go on my Instagram on SHC, you'll see like I landed May 27th, and the floor was dirt, and there was some structure of the bar up, and then we opened July 3rd. Wow. And so we went from dirt floors, rough plans, to fully operational, opening for guests in 5 and a bit weeks.
But you were there for how long?
I was there for the first stint about 7.5, 8 weeks.
Right. And you did a total of 4 months or something?
Total of 4 months. I came home for 3 weeks. So I opened the first venue, which was called Misfits in the financial area, which is a Mediterranean, 70-seat Mediterranean-style space. Full wine menu and cocktail program, hiring, firing, the whole thing. Then my second trip back, I helped open up our little speakeasy in the back called Roxy, which is a Caribbean, like Latin American style speakeasy in the back. We got that rolling. Unfortunately, that didn't open before I left. It opened just after, but we did a few events. And then I helped open up, did all the organization for the third venue, which is called Bayside, which is over on Fullerton Place, right across from like the Marina Bay Sands that you see in every picture of Singapore, the big three towers with the boat on top.
Right.
So yeah, in a space of technically about 5.5 months, it was 3 venues.
Huh.
So from start to finish.
So with all this experience, both in Singapore and elsewhere, what are some key ingredients you need to add to any of these venues to make them successful? What have you learned that are the things that this place has to have? Is it about the decor and the setting? Is it about what drinks are on the menu or how the staff behave? Or what are the things that you impart to people like, this is what you need if this is going to be successful?
It's literally everything. Like, it is everything from the music to the lighting to the way the tables are set to the way the staff welcome you at the front door, to the way the staff are trained, everything. So, like, it's such a massive amount of work to do, and it takes a lot of patience. And as a consultant, it's hard because I think a hospitality consultant's a little bit different to most consultants, is that you take everything personal. Like, you're in the hospitality industry to make people happy.
Yeah.
And so it is personal. It's a deep, ingrained, genetic making people happy. But at the end of the day, you are just a consultant. So sometimes people don't listen to you. And so you do have to step away and disconnect and treat it like a business at times. And so you do have to put everything, all your heart on a plate. And it is fun to try and think up these different concepts at all the time. So Cafe Mexico was heavy agave bar, really like melding what Cafe Mexico used to be and what Cafe Mexico and the owners wanted it to be, and sort of melding that. Pagliacci's, of course, was brand new bar, brand new kitchen, everything, but the front of house couldn't look any different. The food menu's not changing any time. I didn't want to be dragged down Government Street behind horses, sort of like changing anything.
Don't touch pags.
So, but a really good wine list, and like elevated the bar program a little bit. Misfits was like hardcore Mediterranean, which has a massive definition of what that is. And then you sort of you start with a core principle of what the idea is, and then you sort of build out, okay, so what do you want the wine list to be? And how do you want the cocktails to be, and what does the culture and what does the market ask for in Singapore, which is it's a whole different beast there, and so on and so forth. And then how far do you want to push the envelope, and do you want to push the envelope, or do you want to be mainstream? And so there's all these little factors that turn into this big. It's like one of those little things you get from the museum, the little balls that start off this big and then go poof like that. And that's pretty much an idea goes like that and completes out from that.
Right. Wow. And so now you converted this into not only doing other projects similar, but you also have a few on-the-air options.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about the podcast. You got to get to these now. So if people want to find you, the podcast, there's a few to check out.
So I do the Post Shift podcast twice a week. Which
the what? Sorry, say it again.
The Post Shift podcast.
Okay.
So imagine it's always been designed as like you're at the end of your evening, you're having a beer at the end of your shift. You throw me on that'd be great, but throw me on the loudspeakers, or you listen to me on the way home. So I do 2 a week there. So one's my Tuesday episodes, like life advice from bartenders to managers to something that may have happened to me that I wanted to talk about. And then my Fridays are always interviews with like names in the industry. So right now I've interviewed the 3 bartenders on the West Coast here that are doing Bacardi Legacy, which is a big cocktail competition in Puerto Rico in a couple of weeks. Which that sort of spawned, and then Whiskey Fest is this weekend, obviously. So I've got a myriad of ambassadors and stuff coming in. And then I do my BC Spirits podcast twice a week, which is a tasting episode where I taste through a category of craft spirits in BC.
And specifically BC Spirits.
Always BC Spirits.
Okay.
And then I do an episode with a distiller or a craft spirit writer or something like that.
Okay, I've got a question.
Okay.
So in 3 words or less, Tell me what the status of BC Spirits is today. Like
diverse, exciting.
You got one more. They got one more.
Diverse, exciting, and underappreciated.
Underappreciated. Okay, interesting last word there. Why is it underappreciated?
I think anything that's new craft spirit wise, 20 years ago was craft beer had the same thing. BC wine had the same thing. It's always a double-edged sword. You either you have really great products out there that no one hears about. Like we have almost 80 distilleries in the province. 80. All of them make anywhere from 2 to 25 SKUs, which makes a hell of a lot of product.
How many of them make a vodka?
You'd be surprised. Actually, I've talked to a lot of distilleries lately, and a lot of them are dropping their vodka. Like they're focusing on their gins and their other products. They're not making their vodka.
Well, that makes sense to me because, I mean, vodka is... I mean, I know vodka has its place, but it tends to be a slightly more neutral...
Commoditized.
Well, and it's a bit more neutral in flavor. Like, you can do a lot more exciting... I mean, I'll use the word terroir kind of things with a gin. You can add a lot of character to it, more so than I would think vodka. Unless you're... Like, I know the Sheringham Distillery does a vodka with loganberries grown locally. I mean, like, that makes sense to me. But just a base vodka seems to me to be less exciting.
It'd be harder to distinguish.
Yeah, why would you buy
right.
the craft version of the vodka versus just any old vodka if you're just mixing it with something and you're not going to be...
And that's what
getting
the sort of angle it is. But it's a saturated market,
Yeah.
and how many craft vodkas can you really do when you've got like Tito's, which is classed as U.S. craft, and that's a massive beast.
It now is the best-selling. It just overtook Smirnoff in the U.S.
I saw that.
Unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so I think BC Spirits, a lot of people don't get exposed to them enough. Like, you got your big brands. Sheringham, I would say, is a big brand. Stillhead here on the island. We've got 20 distilleries on the island. But I think it's also one of the things that they're always a little bit more expensive because of how they have to be made than the regular stuff, the regular brands, your Bombays, your Tanquerays and stuff like that. And then people either love or hate it. So getting that brand loyalty takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And a lot of these little distilleries don't have the money to to push against Hendrix and Tanqueray.
I know we want to get to your other podcast in a second, but since we're talking about BC Spirits now, and this podcast you've got, by the way, check out the podcast. It's just called BC Spirits?
Just called BC Spirits.
But since we're talking about it, I got to ask you, what are you seeing as a couple of the distilleries or a couple of BC products that are really worth noting right now?
There's a couple of really good ones. I'm loving all the whiskey that Shelter Point's putting out.
Shelter Point?
Point up in Campbell River.
Okay.
Their single malts are fantastic. Okanagan Spirits in the Okanagan, they're one of the oldest, biggest distilleries in the province. So they've got 25 things that you can have, and they've got like a sea buckthorn liqueur, which is just...
What even is that?
Yeah.
Sea buckthorn is like a little tiny berry.
Okay.
Similar to like an elderberry and that sort of thing. So super acidic, and liqueur is sweet, but it comes through with this amazing acidity. And they have a rhubarb liqueur that's spectacular. So they make a whole bunch of liqueurs, as well as their whiskey, as well as their gin and vodka and stuff like that.
So what about a few weeks ago we had Elaine McIsaac and Jason on the show, and we talked about Lunette, like a non-alcoholic spirit,
gin.
Distillate, distillate. What about that trend? Because I follow. There's spirits business is one of the things I follow, and drinks business, and there seems to be, certainly in the UK and in Europe, there's a growing trend towards low or no alcohol distillates. Is that something that is... What do you think of those? What do you think of all that?
I think it's a market share that's going to keep expanding. I think the demographic that's drinking the low and no alcohols are more health conscious. We can say millennials and zennials and whatnot and all those sort of things. But I think they're more health conscious. I think the market is expanding quite rapidly. Seedlip sort of made that really sort of kick off. But I see non-alcoholic ingredients a little bit like the cannabis market. And back in the day, if you're old enough, ostrich farming and kangaroo farming in Australia was one of those things. Like, everybody started doing it, then saturated the market, then only the really strong ones like sort of stayed. I see that as like the non-alcoholic market is very similar to the cannabis market, where all of a sudden Canadian cannabis got legalized and everybody jumped on the train. So it's saturating the market with these growers and purveyors and all sorts of stuff. But then the ones with the really good brands and the really good products will continue, and the other ones will just fall to the wayside. I love Lumet. Like, I did a book signing at Munro's for Christmas, and I did basically a Lumet gimlet with the Lumet and the Frostbite lime cordial, and just did 2-to-1. It was perfect. Gave it a shake, poured it over ice, and people just loved it. So I think it's a movement.
Because you could do that at a bookstore.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's no alcohol.
There's no alcohol in
Yeah.
it. So I had a big, long Facebook discussion yesterday about Lumet, but I like it as a product, but you do have to treat it very differently because it is a distilled product in the way it's similar to orange flower water or rose water. And it was like, well, you can't drink it neat. I'm like, would you drink orange flower water neat or rose water neat? Like, it's a water distillate. Like, it's a heavy combination, and then they distill it down into a hydrosol. And so you have to treat it as such. So you need to give it texture because it doesn't have any alcohol, so it has no texture. So as soon as some bartenders, and then again, that'll go back to the same thing as sort of BC Spirits, is that it's not a plug and play. Like, you can't just take something mainstream out of a drink and put a BC Spirit in, and it's going to taste exactly the same, and everybody's going to love it the same. It has to be tweaked to be different. And everybody always asks me about BC Spirits and cocktails. I'm like, it's similar to when Hendrix first hit the market. When Hendrix hit the market, everybody's like, this isn't gin. This isn't my Tanqueray or Bombay. This is weird. Roses and cucumber and stuff. It's not a plug and play. But then everybody started understanding how to use Hendrix and how to work it into cocktails. And then it became the beast that it is now. And I think non-alcohol ingredients like Lumet and BC Spirits, they're both things that have to be utilized, and bartenders have to be smart about doing it and not think, oh, well, this drink tastes like rubbish because I've swapped out this BC gin. It's crap. And it's like, well, no, it's not. It's just that you don't know how to use it absolutely correctly.
Right.
Here's the next thing we want to do, though. Just some advice to those listeners out there who love the idea of cocktails but are doing it at home. And it's a bit difficult if you don't have the power of an entire bar behind you sometimes to really pull it off. But what are some of the key things that, if you had to just have a few select things to have your home bar ready for cocktails, what should you have? Maybe some tools as well. Is it okay if we talk about that next?
Of course.
Yeah, but I'm going to take this off. Go on a tangent. I know I never, ever go on tangents.
Really?
Yeah, I know. It's very rare.
I feel like this is going to be part 1 of 5.
Yeah, we might have to have you back for a couple more
Well,
shows.
if you can have all those podcasts, I can have a few tangents. Yeah.
By the way, we got Shawn Soole here, author of Great Northern Cocktails and a bunch of other things.
So the WTO decision that is going to shake up the BC wine industry. Because it's the decision, for those who don't know, is forces the BC government to allow import wine on grocery store shelves.
Yes.
What does the spirit side of the business? Do they want in on grocery? Do you see any future for that?
I think the separation between craft and commercial is a sore point that I don't usually get into because I try and keep BC Spirits like Switzerland, like it's neutral territory. I think the rules of fact, like BC craft distilleries can't be listed at BC liquor stores. They can only be listed at private liquor stores, and then commercial gets listed pretty much automatically at BC liquor stores. I think that's going to be where the division comes down. Like, if they do allow spirits in the grocery stores, are they going to allow the entire gambit, the entire selection that's available in BC, or are they going to stick to this sort of rule where if you're a grocery store, do you get classed as a private liquor store? Do you get classed as a BC provincial style liquor store where you have to have the mandated like Tanquerays and Smirnoffs and that sort of thing? I think for the craft distilling movement, they're really just happy to put anything anywhere on a shelf to have exposure. Like a lot of these distilleries are doing craft markets, like 5, 6, 7 different craft markets on a weekly basis. Like, it's a mental when you think about like someone who's only making 15,000 liters of product a year has staff going to hit every single craft market from Duncan to Victoria, and we have like 6 every weekend here in Victoria, Vancouver as well. So they're really, I think craft distillers just want to have the sort of exposure that everybody else gets. And so I think the grocery store thing I'm very curious about. I think beer and wine is going to be the easy fix. But I still think that there is a certain level of the prohibition style state in BC when it comes to hard liquor. In a way that we can't do that because if we have hard liquor in grocery stores, then it exposes that to children and families and so on and so forth.
Of course, children and families don't see that at home.
Yeah. So I think there's a certain level of holding back on that one. But I think when it comes to craft distillers, they really just want the same sort of exposure and support from listings as everybody else gets.
Right. So, well, there's a whole other can of worms there, but I'm not going to go down that tangent because I was only allowed one.
Yeah.
So
you're limited today, Dan.
Yeah. So now, speaking of home, and this is where the whole grocery thing came out of my brain was, okay, I'm going to the grocery store on my way home. What do I need? Like I want to set up I want to have people over and have make some decent cocktails for them. What do I need? Not only from a booze point of view, but is there tools? Is there how many terrariums and dry ice quantities do I need?
I think there's some standard equipment, like a solid Boston shaker. I like 10 on 10, like a small 10 into a big 10, because you can stir, you can shake, you can do a whole bunch of stuff with those two things.
Okay, a dumb question, just since you've
Boston
mentioned this.
shaker.
What is the difference between stirring and shaking, really? If you're making your cocktail and it says, hey, the recipe says this should be shaken, but I think I'm just going to stir it. What's the
You're really making this a part one of five series here. Okay. So shaking usually, like, this is not a hard and fast rule, but it is sort of a standard rule. Anything that's all spirit, no juice, no syrup, no nothing like that, stirred. Anything that has juice, egg whites, so on and so forth, you shake it to emulsify it all together.
Okay, so it just better blends it.
Yes.
Okay.
So like you've got different gravities and densities of liquid in a shaker. So you've got alcohol, syrup, lime juice, like citrus juice, whatever, egg whites. Everything needs to be shaken to combine them all and give them an even texture, whereas it's all liquor. Stirring it will achieve the same thing.
Okay.
You're not going to have vermouth sink to the bottom of a martini if you stir it.
Right. That answered the question beautifully, actually. Thank you.
So, but what is there anything negative if I do shake something that's like a martini?
It's a personal preference. Some people really like it super cold. Some people don't like vermouth. I don't try and judge any person's sort of drinking. I shouldn't say that because
come on, you judge me all the time. You're sitting here looking at me and judging me.
I'm sure that if I say I never judge anyone, there's going to be comments underneath this episode going, "Oh no, I was at your bar once and you judged me." If you want it shaken, you want to shake. I think I've got to a stage older in my career that I'm just like, you know what, you want to. Yeah. It bruises the gin, so you're really lengthening it out because we talked about limette and not having texture. Like if you shake and add an ounce of water basically from shaking, it's going to be a very long, thin drink, especially if you don't add vermouth, which gives a bit of texture and body to the drink. But if some people just like 2 ounces of gin shaken really hard served up,
sure,
that's
go
your
for
thing.
It.
That should knock yourself out.
All right, so you need a shaker.
Okay.
Now
there's a ton of specialty mixing glasses and all this sort of stuff for the hardcore geeks. For the at-home bartender, a Boston 10 on 10 will work just fine. You need a good spoon. Again, you can get a cheap spoon with the little red tops that you see in most bars, but with places like Vessel has a cocktail craft market that I look after there. They have some really nice 30-centimeter long stainless steel spoons that just do the job perfectly. You need a nice Hawthorne strainer. So that's one with the big spring around the outside. You can use that for everything as well. And then that's and a nice jigger. So a nice.
What is a jigger?
Jigger who, jigger what? It's sort of like an egg cup, if you will. Like
is that the thing that looks like that?
The thimbles.
Yeah.
So they're little measuring cups that do your half ounces, quarter ounces,
gotcha,
full ounces, that sort of thing. So that's one thing you just need to make sure your cocktails are on point measurement-wise. Doing it by eye, especially an at-home bartender, is going to slide you down a rough path really quickly. So equipment-wise, they're really the only 4 things that you really need to get crazy about.
All right, so if you're stocking the bar alcohol-wise, what products would you recommend? If you could only really afford to get a few things in that home bar, what are some key items?
Depending on how crazy you want to go for cocktails, I usually say solid vodka. Like your stuff that in the industry we call well spirits. So solid vodka, solid gin, a rye, a bourbon, and a rum, and a tequila. So those 6 things are basically you can make a baseline for a lot of things. Then you just need a dry vermouth, a sweet vermouth for your martinis and so on and so forth. And then you can start sort of spreading out from that. Like there's a beautiful thing to be had if you really make a really good highball, like a gin and tonic or a rye and soda. Like there's something to be said, like picking the perfect soda water, which is geeking out a little bit, but this is the Dork Uncorked. So like,
this is what we do here.
This is home.
It's one thing that a couple of my staff and me have done in the past, where we've picked up a whole bunch of sparkling water and tasted with the same whiskey over and over again to see how it tastes, and picking the exact soda water that goes really well with that whiskey.
Oh, well, should we give a soda water recommendation? Because soda's another key thing, because beyond the alcohol, you've also got a few other staple things to mix with.
I think Market on Yates has got a great selection of tonics and soda. that you can buy single bottles. So you buy like a Fever Tree single bottle or a Phillips tonic single bottle, and you take it home and you can play around with it. And gin and tonics are my thing right now, just purely because I'm working on a big gin and tonic project. I'm actually working on a whiskey and ginger project too, which is a whole different animal. But pairing these different tonics with all these different craft gins all across Canada. And so it's really eye-opening. People go, "Oh, I'm just good with Canada Dry." I'm like, "Yeah, but are you?"
Let's have this existential conversation. Are you really okay with Canada Dry?
And that's the thing is, like, I got nothing against old school classic tonics, but just with the market open, like, the funny thing with most of the ryes and bourbons and whiskeys that I've been tasting, especially here in Canada, the Fetterman's ginger beer actually goes better with them than their ginger ales. And just because of the slightly higher caramelly sort of flavor that Canadian whiskeys have, the ginger beer just gives you a nice punch.
So maybe hot tip right there. Ginger beer over ginger ale in your bar for mixing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And just play around with it. Like, every week, pick a cocktail you want to try out, a classic, so a Negroni, a Manhattan, a Martini, something like that, and then just go buy 2 bottles of something. And that's how you sort of build your bar out from those 6 base ones. You can, once you start getting a bottle of Campari in the bar, you all of a sudden you can have a whole schwackload of things. You make Boulevardiers and Old Pals and Negronis and all this sort of stuff. So pick a cocktail, start with a baseline, pick a cocktail once a week, buy a bottle or 2, play around with it, and then you just build out from there.
I need some advice on one other thing that might come up, and I've already been looking through your book again. Shawn Soole, author of Great Northern Cocktails. One thing I see in this a lot is in the ingredients, because you've got a bunch of cocktails listed, egg white. And you mentioned egg white there. A little while ago, my brothers and I were having a cocktail night. We decided to do that.
Oh, gee, I thought you were going to say an egg fight.
An egg fight. No, yeah. Well, we did. We looked up some recipes online. We had a couple of ingredients we wanted to mix in, and we found egg white keep coming up, and we'd never experienced that ourselves, or at least we didn't know about it. Maybe we had it, and we didn't realize because we weren't making it ourselves. But and we did it. We loved it, and it added a very neat texture to the drink. But I thought I'd ask you, since you're the expert, what does the egg white do, and how do you use an egg white in a cocktail?
Exactly how you described it. It gives you a massive amount of texture. Like when you shake gin, a little bit of syrup, and lemon juice, it can get very thin very quickly. Egg white just gives it this extra boost of like texture and flavor. There's also for the vegans out there, there's a non. It's an organic herbal foamer called the Miraculous Foamer from a company in Vancouver called Miss Better Bitters. And I've been using that for years over egg whites because of the carbon footprint that it actually has. Because egg whites are great. I don't like using the pasteurized carton stuff. I crack fresh.
Right.
And unless you've got a kitchen that is using tons of egg yolks in their food,
it's
like
a
pasta
waste.
and stuff, it can become a waste real quick. And so this Miraculous Foamer is like a dash of this herbal thing. You just shake it as hard as you can and gives you the same head and same texture.
What product is that again?
Miraculous Foamer from Miss Better Bitters.
Well,
Miss Better Bitters.
See, this has been really useful. Here's a bunch of tips for the home bar, something like that to keep around.
And I think the at-home bartender is becoming a bigger thing. Cocktails aren't getting cheaper. Alcohol's not getting cheaper. The cost of operating bars and restaurants in Victoria is not getting any cheaper anytime soon. So at-home enthusiasts are becoming a very, very big sort of driving force in Victoria, where going out to the Venetos and Clives and Little Jumbos is still a special occasion thing. But drinking at home is a massive, massive deal now. So,
well, it is the majority. Like the majority of beverage alcohol is consumed at home. Yeah, vast majority. Like it's like 75-80%.
That's a whole other episode talking about retail versus on-premise.
Sure, yeah.
And one more time, just back to those key alcohols and liquors you should have if you're trying to set up your own home bar and you don't want to go too crazy. Give us, again, some recommendations. You listed them off really quickly, but we should give them to everybody one more time.
So really solid vodka around that $35 to $35 price point. Mostly everything considered that $35 price point. Vodka, a nice gin. For gin, I like to find something that I can make into a nice martini. My like go-to like macro gin, I suppose, like international gin would be like Tanqueray 10, because it goes really well in a martini, it goes really well in cocktails, it goes really well in gin and tonic.
Well, and that's the thing, you want something that's going to be versatile. If you're only going to have one in your arsenal.
A good tequila like Espolon. Rums sort of sit around like a white to a semi-aged rum, similar to like Havana Club 3, or Carta Brava, or Florida Canyon 4, something like that. A good rye, huge fan of like 40 Creek and Lot 40, both very differing flavor profiles, very versatile for highballs as well as cocktails. and then a bourbon. And my go-to bourbons is like your Jim Beam Blacks, and for your international brands. And then, like we talked about BC Spirits, like then you can, once you start getting your baselines down, then you start looking at substitutes that are made locally, which, like at Olo, when we opened up Olo, that's what we basically did, is like, oh, an Amaretto came on the market. Guess what? Luxardo's off the back bar. Like, we got a craft Amaretto from Vancouver. Same thing with coffee liqueurs and all those different things. So, yeah, those sort of macro things. And then just a dry vermouth and a like Nolly Pratt and a Shinzano Rosso or a Martini Rosso. And then like a bottle of Cointreau in there. And that's sort of like, that can give you a big gambit of cocktails right there. And then pick a cocktail every week, a classic. Like, literally Google. Like, we have supercomputers in our pockets, and people still want to read books and stuff, which I still read books, but
still buy your book. Still buy your book. Yeah.
That's right.
But like, you've got Google, so type in top 10 classic cocktails and just go out and get the ingredients for those cocktails and those little tiny things, and then away you go.
You know, the next segment is the pick of the week, and I'm going to ask you to do a pick of the week cocktail.
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay.
Something that we could make at home.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's get to that. But before we do, let's just one more time give a shout out to our guest. Shawn Soole is here. He is the author of Great Northern Cocktails. You can pick it up in a number of places, but Munro's downtown.
Munro's, look after the local guys.
Yeah.
And Jessica and the team down there have looked after me so well over the years, and so yeah, they got me a nice little table, and I made Limette cocktails and signed a bunch of books. It was really good.
It's a book that profiles a bunch of Canadian bartenders all across the country and shares recipes for some of their I don't know, chosen drinks.
Exactly.
All right, our special guest pick of the week.
Yeah, let me just sit down and sit back, because I this is a good few minutes for me.
The pressure's off you, Rod.
I know, this is good.
The pressure was tough. Like that little break, I'm just like, oh, what am I doing? Am I doing approachable? Am I doing spirit forward? Am I doing mixed? It's wintertime, so does anyone want a daiquiri at this time of the year? Like,
you feel my pain.
Yeah. But what do you got for us? What is the cocktail pick of the week?
So I was thinking about, it's winter, it needs to be warming, and so I did go spirit forward, which I know is not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but I think a rum old fashioned.
Okay.
Oh.
So I wanted to go like a deep rum. Let's keep it on the inexpensive side. Something that's actually quite deep, like Goslings or Brugal Anejo, like a solid Anejo rum, like something really
dark.
deep clove Christmas spice sort of thing, and just change it up. You head to the market at Yates and pick up a bottle of Rootside sodas, root beer syrup. So you get their root beer syrup, and then Vessel has a whole schwack load of bitters from Miss Better Bitters, as well as Bittered Sling. And so Bittered Sling has a plum and root beer bitters. So 2 ounces of a really good Anejo rum, half an ounce of root beer syrup from Rootside sodas, and then like don't be stingy. Like 3 to 4 solid dashes of the plum and root beer bitters from Bittered Sling, stirred over ice. Like, you can build it all in the glass, ice the glass, and give it a good stir until it's all nice and diluted down and really like cold and all meshed up together. And then just a garnish with an orange twist.
Okay.
Wow.
Now,
It does sound good.
give it to us one more time quickly. It's
It's a rum old fashioned.
a rum old fashioned, dark rum.
Root beer syrup.
Root beer syrup.
Rootside sodas. Some plum and root beer bitters from Bittered Sling. And then just stirred and strained.
With a twist of orange.
With a twist of orange.
Okay.
Wow. I am feeling warm.
I went pretty
Yeah.
off the cuff there, but
I like it.
An old fashioned's a good one because it's just spirit bitters syrup,
Easy to do at home.
and you can just swap out anything. So once
Yeah.
you have that root beer syrup, I love cherry bitters, root beer syrup, and
okay.
bourbon.
So
Like,
you could really mix all of those
you
together.
can start like a cherry root beer old fashioned. Doesn't that sound freaking awesome?
Yeah, it does.
So for me, it's just like once you learn one classic really, really well, you can sort of just plug and play and switch stuff out real quick.
Right. I think it's our first cocktail pick of the week, Rod.
It is. We should mark. What episode is this?
This is 175, I think.
Ooh, this is a seminal episode. It's all up from here. We're going to see that hockey stick curve.
It was a good round number, too.
Yeah.
We had to do something special for 175.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Yeah.
Well, Shawn Soole, thanks so much for coming in and
Thank you
being
very
our
much.
guest today. I'm sure we'll talk to you again, I hope.
Well,
And-
part 2 through to 5.
I think
of
we
the
should.
series.
Where's your next trip to? Where are you going?
I'm in New Orleans for the American Distillers Institute.
Are you okay with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I'm speaking at the ADI conference. I'm doing a trip to Vegas with the family. I'll be podcasting a ton. Solomon wants to go to Spain in March, so that might be on the table to go to Jerez in Spain for a week. And I might be in Vietnam opening a place, as well as Myanmar, Yangon in Myanmar this year opening a place too. So there's a couple of like plans that are peripheral right now.
Well, we're going to get the dates for the New Orleans gig, and we'll tape there. How's that?
Yeah, we'll come join you.
Yeah,
we got the budget, right, Rod?
sure, absolutely.
You keep that budget.
Spared.
Is it in your pocket?
It is.
Okay,
I've got all my empties.
All right. Well, that's it for that's all the time we've got for today's show. We will see you next week, Rod.
Thanks, guys. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and people who I haven't met before, or mentors, or people I idolize, and fanboy out a little bit. I really hope you enjoy the episodes and everything you get from them, because I'm just going to keep loving doing them, and they're just going to keep happening. But I recently started working with Beyond Footwear out of Toronto. Beyond Footwear is, if you've looked at my Instagram or my social media, my fantastic shoes that I wear around. My pink flamingos get a lot of attention, but I've started working with them as their brand ambassador. So if you go to beyondfootwear.com, so BIION footwear.com, and order a pair of shoes and type in my name, and hopefully if you're listening to this podcast you know how to spell my name, you'll get 20% off a pair of shoes. I really enjoy them. They're comfy as hell. I travel in them, I work in them, I do absolutely everything in them, and I really enjoy working with these guys. It's an amazing company out of Toronto, and I'm thankful that I had been given the opportunity to be a brand ambassador. So I want to thank everybody for the support for the podcast. I want to thank everybody for following along on social media, and if you want a cool gangster pair of shoes, you've got to have a pair of Beyonds. See you guys. Bye.